you explain the criminal justice system to a school kid? How would you describe criminology and its allied subjects to a school student? Let me see if I can help. While making a plain simple glass of lemon water. Now, as we all know that water, plain simple water, is one of the fundamental requirements for sustaining life as we know it, right? Whatever may be your favorite drink, पर पानी का काम तो पानी ही करता है. And there is no substitute for plain simple drinking water, right? The same way, this plain simple water, that is the law of the land. That is a legal system. For day-to-day life, for general social administration, for everyday business, trade, educational institutions, life as we know it, as a society, as a community, as a country, when it comes to international cooperation, international trade, everything, even politics for that matter, the political system, general day-to-day social administration. For that, we have the policy frameworks, we have the legislative codes, we have the constitution, we have the laws of the land, right? Now, plain simple water is great. It's an absolute requirement. But what if you only had water to drink? I mean, a little variation is needed, right? Even for optimizing on electrolyte balance of the body naturally, we do need to add certain supplements or certain additional components to plain water at times. Same way, one of the basic concepts that we learn in criminology is that a crime-free society, a world without crime, is an utopian concept. Not just that, a society which does not know or which does not experience divine behavior, criminal behavior at all, would also be a society that does not progress. This might need a little more explanation, which I'll save for a different video. But right now, let's understand this, that if we don't know what we stand against, what behavior is unacceptable to us, we will also not know what behavior is acceptable to us, we will also not know what we stand for. So, certain amount of deviance, certain amount of little variation from the otherwise set standard already decided upon normal human behavior, whatever normal means, is allowed and is acceptable, and we got to make space for it. That is what helps us progress as a society, as a community. Even if we come down to the very human component of a society, it is important to understand that there is a variation, a large variation of human behavior, right? Human behavior occurs on a spectrum, as I keep saying. So, every human being, we have our own phases. We will not always be in our perfect, best human behavior. There will be times when we slip up. We all have anger issues. We all have times when we hurt each other unintentionally, and we need to course correct, and we need to go back, and will not always say the perfect thing, do the perfect thing. So, there is a certain healthy limit of unacceptable, not very perfect human behavior. For the sake of simplicity, let's just say that's like lemon water, and adding a little bit of lemon juice into plain simple water just adds some flavor into it, right? It just helps optimize on the electrolyte balance of the body, and that's fine. Now, what if we just overdo it? What if we walk over to some extreme and go on and add almost all of this lemon juice into the water? Will that make this water very drinkable? If we plain and simple add excess of lemon juice, if we simply squeeze in excess of lemon juice into this glass of plain water, will this water be drinkable? No, right? And what will be your first instance? Your first reaction, your first response in all probability would be to instinctively add some sugar to it, right? And it helps. Undoubtedly, you add some sugar to it, you stir it up, and the taste improves a little. That is psychological first aid. That is the mental health system, the mental health support system, emotional upskilling, behavioral upskilling as we like to call it. And it helps whenever we go through a phase of sustained anger issues, sustained anxiety issues, any possible difficult phase in life, whether we are healing from trauma or we are simply trying to be a better person, either way, our first line of defense or our first line of action, let's put it that way, is to take support from the mental health setup that we have. What if, despite all that, this excess of lemon juice is just added into it? This entire bowl of lemon juice is just poured into this glass. How long will you keep adding sugar? You might, but at some point, it will no longer help, right? It will not make this any better in taste. Because adding excess of lemon water will only make it more sour and bitter all at once, and to really cut through the rancidity, what you need is to add a pinch of salt. Now it may be plain simple table salt or it may be some rock salt, that depends. But to really cut through the rancidity of this lemon water, you would need to add some salt into it. That is the intervention of the police, or the role of the investigative agencies. Now remember how I said that you can add plain simple table salt or rock salt. So that means that we have the civil police or we have the special investigative teams. We have the special investigative agencies which cater to specific forms of crime as well. All of that depends. That is the beginning of the justice system, the criminal justice system, because mental health support can only do so much to ensure social security. And at some point, when this deviant criminal behavior, unacceptable human behavior, crosses a certain line, it gets determined as criminal behavior. That is when we absolutely need the intervention of the police, we need the intervention of the investigative agencies to ensure that the criminal behavior does not affect everyone else in the society, and that victimization is contained, and to ensure that the community on the whole can continue living in a comparatively safe and secure and peaceful environment. Now, we also need a third person objective. Why? To maintain objectivity. Because you see, the mental health support will have one perception, and although it's true that sometimes only empathy and compassion and understanding and therapeutic help, like I said, does not ensure social security, but it is important. At the same time, the more harsh, I wouldn't say harsh, but the more stern rule of law, which is the police, that is also important. We need a third person objective to simply look at this glass of lemon water, understand the different components in it, and figure out that, okay, this amount of lemon juice was indeed excessive for this particular volume of plain simple water, and this amount of sugar was supposed to be helpful to cut through the rancidity, but it did not help, which is why this amount of salt was absolutely needed. And now, to ensure that this lemon water becomes drinkable again, this is the additional set of spices that has to be added. This third person objective analysis is done by the judiciary, that is the court of law. But how will the court of law just look at this glass of lemon water and differentiate the different components, understand what went into it, what did not? For that, the judiciary needs the help of other specialized people such as forensic scientists. What forensic science does is it gives you the what, from where, how much of the different ingredients, components of a criminal situation, a criminal incident. So forensic scientists will take this glass of lemon water and it will tell you, and they will tell you that this is a component of water, this is a component of lemon juice, this is a component of sugar, this is a component of salt. These are the other components that were in it, but we couldn't have seen it with bare eyes, and it's only a scientific procedure that can tell you that this is the additional course of events that has happened. These are the other chemical reactions that went into it. And accordingly, the forensic scientist can give a detailed report to the court, to the investigative agencies, to better understand the components of this glass of lemon water. Now with that report, the court might decide that given the excessive bitter sourness in this glass of lemon water, maybe we need to add a little black pepper to cut through the rancidity, maybe we need to add some chaat masala. Maybe we need to add some roasted jeera powder or jal jeera. I don't know. That depends on your taste. But in this situation, what that really depends on is the nature of the crime. And these additional spices that you can never have by itself. You cannot have black pepper by itself. You cannot have roasted jeera powder by itself. You cannot have chaat masala just by itself. Ideally, you shouldn't. I know some of you do, but it's not advisable. Either way, the point is, these spices cannot be had just by itself. These are not spices that you add to anything and everything indiscriminately, but sometimes they become absolutely necessary, right? That's the correctional services. That's the prison system. So you have open prisons, you have community service, you have rigorous imprisonment, you have simple imprisonment, you have fines, you have confiscation of property. There are different ways. You have house arrest. There are different mechanisms in the correctional services setup that the court objectively decides, which is why we need a third person objective here, which is the judiciary. Now the evolution of the prison system, the evolution of the theories of punishment, the correctional services setup, all of that in itself is a very interesting topic of conversation that can be taken up separately. But for now, it's important to understand that this is more or less an oversimplified structure of the criminal justice system. But the question remains, what is criminology then? What does a criminologist do, and how can the subject of criminology help us understand the criminal justice system any better? Here's how. Criminology looks at this glass of lemon water through all the different phases that I just described, and it analyzes the why and how and when and for what of each of the different components that went into it in each phase of the system, and understand how that impacted this lemon water to turn it into the lemon water that it is right now. So it will look at the plain water, it will look at the lemon juice, it will understand how much sugar was needed, how much sugar was added, it will understand what kind of salt was required, what kind of salt was first added, what was not added, how much of it was required, how much of it was added, and at what point was the salt supposed to be added, at what point did we add the salt. When did we first need to add the salt and not the sugar? When did we first need to add the sugar and not the salt? In other words, when did we first need a psychological first aid and not the intervention of the police? And when did we first need the intervention of the police and then need mental health support? Same way, if we add black pepper or roasted jeera powder or chaat masala or any other added spice, was that proportional to the already existing components of the lemon water, and how did that ultimately impact the lemon water? Did it make it any drinkable? Did that ensure social security? Did that help change this person? Did that help change the person to a more productive, safe member of the community in the future? If not, what else could be done? What else can we do now? Because we can't go back and change anything, but yeah, we can always do better now that we know better. So criminology is like the bond that holds all the components together. It is a multidisciplinary subject. So like law studies water as water, mental health support studies sugar as sugar. That is, I'm just using the same symbols that I used here, okay? It's not a literal meaning. It's definitely not literal. But what criminology does is, being a multidisciplinary subject, it studies the intersectionality of all these components in the civil society as well. Law, civil life, mental health support system, the investigative agencies and police, the court and judiciary, and the entire trial process that takes place, the correctional services, the prison system, and how helpful or supportive that is for the accused, for the criminals, for their families, victim support system, witness protection, if that is an established system in the country, community support. Criminology studies the intersection of all the different components, all the different entities that are affected and impacted by a criminal incident that eventually give rise or support or do not support criminal behavior, and the step forward that we can take. who is more likely to be victimized, what are the crime trends that are taking place, how can we prevent victimization, how can we prevent future incidences of crime, one particular type of crime in one particular place. And that is the kind of study that criminology does. Now, it's really not possible to study criminology without studying victimology. But what is the difference between victimology and victim blaming, you might ask? Here's my answer. Victimology is understanding that this glass of lemon water, as we know it, that is the components, all the components together, the water, the lemon juice, the sugar, salt, all of it, it is held together in this time and place by the glass. The glass did not magically transform the water into lemon water. That is true. Equally true is the fact that all these components, the water, the lemon juice, sugar, everything would not have been held together, would not have been mixed together into the mixture that it is right now if the glass did not hold all of it, right? Victim blaming, on the other hand, is a bizarre, irrational comment that, oh, the lemon water is not lemon water. The glass magically transformed the plain simple water into lemon water. The glass turned plain water rancid and the lemon water did not. Without this glass, the lemon water would have tasted the same as plain water. That is victim blaming. Now let's also try to understand the place of a victim in this system, or how community can support or how community perceives a victim. You know that now you have already seen that, I made lemon water in this particular glass, so you know that this glass is stained with lemon water. You know that already. What happens if I pour this same lemon water into this bowl? The lemon water has now taken up the shape of this bowl. Now, depending on how long I keep it in here, if you keep lemon water for n number of hours in a glass jar, its taste will be impacted a certain way. If you leave it in a plastic bowl, its taste may or may not be impacted. If you transfer this same lemon water into a steel glass, it will not just take up the shape of the glass again, but you leave it on for any number of hours or days and the taste will differ because this material is steel and not glass or plastic. I hope that helps you a little in understanding why the same criminal incidents would affect different victims differently. You can leave the same lemon water in a steel glass, in a glass jar, in a plastic bowl for the same number of time, and yet the taste will differ, even if slightly. Why? Because the material of the vessel in which you are keeping that lemon water is different. That is why every victim goes through the same crime, even by the same criminal, differently. And that is why we need individualized victim support. Just like we need individualized treatment for offenders, we also need very distinct individualized support for every victim, and we cannot just come up with very generalized victim support policies that every victim of this particular type of crime will have to go through or will get back to life, will be rehabilitated into their usual life in this exact same way. That does not work. Now, what can you do as a general civilian, as a community member? Let's say you did not know that this glass had lemon water in it. But now when you look at it, it looks stained, right? It doesn't look as clean as it should be. But you don't know that there was lemon water in it. You just get to see that it's not clean enough. You only see the stains that it has now. What can you do? Now, someone might tell you that, oh, there was lemon water in it. And you have two options. You can just be like, oh, okay, right, and leave the glass as it is, untouched, because there was lemon water in it and you just don't want to have to do anything with it ever again. You can simply wish that the glass was clean. The glass itself doesn't want to remain unclean and attract only worse from the environment because it's unclean. The glass at some point also wants to be cleaned, also wants to be as clean as possible as it was before. But is that really possible? No matter how much we clean the glass, will it ever really be as clean as new? No, right? But it can be clean enough. It can be clean enough to go on with life, to get on with, to serve any other purpose that it is meant to serve in its lifetime, right? How do you do that? You rinse it out with plain water. Remember how we said that plain water, plain simple water, the backbone of life, the backbone of the society is law. That is why we need not just strong enough laws and good enough laws on paper, but implementable laws that are actually implemented on a day-to-day basis. You as a general community member can help clean this glass. But you will be able to do it only if you have clean enough plain water. Now, there is no specific timeline for how long the aftertaste lasts in this glass. The glass doesn't know how long it will take for it to be cleaned. You will never know how long it will take for you to clean the glass. But it's not an impossible task either. And if the water is clean enough and your efforts are sincere enough, at some point, you will again get a plain, clean glass. Maybe not as clean as new, but clean enough to serve any other purpose that it is meant to serve in its lifetime. That is the role of the general community, in accordance with the law, with the support of the legal system, in supporting a victim from their recovery, throughout their recovery process from a criminal incident. It may or may not have been a very weird analogy, but it's all I could think of in explaining criminology, victimology, the criminal justice system, allied subjects, to someone, to a school kid, to someone who has never really studied law. And of course, not everyone has to study law and criminology and the specific subjects. Not everyone has to become a justice professional, but the justice system is one such system in the social process that really affects each and every one of us. Fortunately or unfortunately, it does. The criminal law is one set of law that affects each and every citizen, whether we like it or not. So all of us have a stake in the justice system. All of us must understand the fundamentals, the basics of how criminal justice works. And this is the most simplified analogy that I could think of. So I just hope it helps.